This is Shaped for Law, a podcast series that plugs you into the world of legal technology. Join host David Fazackley, CIO of CTS, as he covers news and trends shaping the legal industry.
Hello, my name is Dave Fazackley. I'm the CIO at CTS, and this is the continuation of our podcast series called An Audience with CIOs. And the CIO today is Mr. Mark Parr of HFW. Hi Mark, how are you doing?
Dave, hello. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Thank you for welcoming us into your offices to set this up. Before we get going into what is a smorgasbord of great topics, which we've said we'll talk about today, I heard a rumour, I think it's a vicious rumour, Mark, maybe you can put it down or confirm it, that you're something of a hidden singer, a baritone. Is that correct?
Well, it is correct. As a proud Welshman, you wouldn't be stunned to hear that I love singing. Something that only recently have really got into, though. I think as a young man I was probably too embarrassed to stand up in front of people and sing, but as I get older and a bit more confident, there's nothing that fills me with greater joy than to sort of stand there and belt out some of the old great Welsh classics.
Men of Harlech, if you had a stab at that one, that one gets me. It takes me back to Zulu, you know, when they're all there sort of singing
right.
back.
Thousands of them.
Yes, there's thousands of them.
Exactly that.
Fantastic. No, I was in a choir once myself, but unfortunately all I do now is sing badly at karaoke, but I try and do it out of the country. There are some videos flying around. I try to ignore them. Well, let's get cracking on things a little bit more substantive and hopefully as interesting to our audience. And when you and I were having a prep chat about this, we were talking about data and how data can be a dry subject, but it means different things to different people. And you brought up the theme of making data more available. And so, just as a phrase, I just wanted to ask you, what do you mean by making data more available?
It's a really good point. Data is one of those things that I don't think is properly understood by both the technologists, who will think of it simply as ones and zeros that they're storing and keeping secure and it's in a box somewhere, versus what the lawyers think, and also importantly what the clients think. So I think for me and for HFW, the journey we are going on is, one, to understand the data we have, where it is, how we use it, manipulate it, store it, make it available, but also how we can draw the insight from that, how we can learn from it, how we can find market trends. And then the really good bit of this, and the bit that I think will be really valuable to us as a firm, is how we can make that data useful to our clients. Right. And really draw out that sort of market trends, the insights. And we've heard lots about this for quite a while. This has sort of been a topic in
many conferences.
And you hear lots of people talking about it. We're really grappling with that right now. I think we have lots and lots of data silos. We see prolific use of network drives, prolific use of C drives. We've got a document management system. We've now got OneDrive. All these wonderful tools, but without really thinking about the governance of the data and how we manage that. So we're really digging into that at the moment. At HFW, we've just appointed an information governance manager to help us on that journey. And with that person working in risk, and with my team thinking about from the technology standpoint how we look at that.
And that is a role to really just look at your use and management of data and its usefulness.
Absolutely right. So for the first thing is we've got to sort it out. We've got to get rid of legacy data. We've got to stop holding on to many years of data. We've got to be conscious of residency requirements, client requirements, all that sort of stuff. But I think where the real nub of this, where we really see the exciting bit of this, is being able to offer the clients something from that. Right. Bit of market trends, bit of analysis, bit of an insight.
Which is useful data. So I suppose to get to the useful data that's useful to your clients, you've got to know your data. But before you can know your data, the question is, where is your data?
Absolutely.
And this is where you mentioned silos, that it can be all over the place.
And taxonomies, and the way that people have used the data before, the way that people have stored it, even the simple things of, you save a document. What's the naming convention for saving that document? What classification have you given that document? Have you tagged it with the right metadata? And I think historically particularly at HFW, we were very poor at doing this, and we're now putting in place the mechanism to make sure that the system supports our lawyers as they work to be able to put the right metadata onto it.
Yeah. Now, I'm not trying to have a pop at vendors or software suppliers in the legal market, he says before he goes on and has a slight pop. They don't always make it easy when it comes to data being able to be relational, to talk, to be into singular places. Even understanding the libraries of data in their own databases and the schematic, the database schemas having, library indexes that make sense. I talking about, I suppose that the phrase is, play nicely together. Well, they don't always play nicely together. Some of them don't play at all together or interface. And so, is that a challenge that you see as well? Am I being unfair, or is that something that we can put out there and say to vendors, you're going to have to come up with more commonality and more standards as we need to bring data together?
Yeah, well, it's both. I think we're looking at it now. We've taken that sort of bird's eye view, so we've stepped back a bit and looking at all our systems and going, well, how do they interconnect? How do they play nicely together? Yeah. And if they don't, how do we make that happen? I think we were guilty before of always singularly looking at solutions. So if you need a new finance system, you'd look at a finance solution, you'd look at an HR solution. And we're now saying, well, hang on a minute, let's look at the process that runs through this. Right. What's the life cycle of that data? Right. What are the touch points through the systems, and how do we make that that journey one journey, not one of many, and not one of disconnect? And really taking the time to architect our systems so that they are one singular. They might all be different vendors, and this is part of the challenge right now when you look at the ecosystems of, there are different ecosystems. They all try and answer the same question. I've got to be really canny with my budget about making sure that I find the right solution to answer the question.
Yes.
Not necessarily take a whole raft of tools from one vendor. So I might be mix and match. But if I do that, I've got to be really clear about how they interconnect and how our data migrates through that system on its journey.
It sounds to me that what you're saying is there's a design architecture or a set of principles that you're trying to design at the beginning to say, every time we look at something that we might need, there are these principles around data and data management that we must take into consideration.
Absolutely.
First.
Absolutely.
Rather than just looking at the flashy thing that comes along and that looks good, let's just buy that because it does A, B, C.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do anything else, and it's impossible to work with F, G, H, and all the other things that we needed to do.
And we had a great session this morning actually with my tech delivery team where we looked at that initial the initial sort of tech hopper. Where does the bright idea come from?
Yeah.
What's the exam question? What are we trying to answer here? And then how do we take that through the technology deployment development life cycle to make sure that we're exactly as you're saying, there's a design principle, that there's a process that's been mapped, that we understand the requirement. One of the things technologists are notoriously bad for is providing a solution to a question that hasn't been asked.
Yes.
With a technology viewpoint. And actually we're now saying, if there isn't the question being asked, if we're not trying to answer something, don't answer it because we're too busy. Only answer the questions we're being asked and provide a solution to meet the need. And that's really challenging. I've got my team are very driven, and it's great to see they're ambitious, they're driven, they want to deliver best in breed.
Yes.
But sometimes I have to put the brakes on that and say, but we don't need that now, or we don't need that at all. And actually taking technology out of your technology stack also helps. Because we're talking about reducing complexity.
Yes.
But one of the biggest pleas I get from our lawyers is we're too busy as it is, so simplify.
Right.
So let's remove complexity. So let's take that out and let's be more mindful about how we free them up, give them more time to do the thinking around how they're delivering legal services to our clients.
It's interesting you talk there about making things simpler for lawyers and their understanding. We've heard some big phrases around data. Big data was a few years ago. It was all about big data, and then it's data mining, which is the third thing you need to do to get to big data. And then it was, well, we need a data warehouse. That's what it is. It's a data warehouse. And maybe lawyers and even some technologists could be forgiven for going, is this all the same thing, or are these different things? Sometimes language that's maybe designed to simplify things, as it evolves, just ends up complicating things.
Absolutely, and we're seeing the same. I'm being asked the same question, and I think giving the lawyers opportunity to ask me the question is always helpful, and I spend a lot of time now making sure that I do speak with the business and making sure that I'm listening to what they're saying as well. But you're absolutely right, and trying to demystify this so that it does make sense, and they understand their part to play in it, because of course they're creating a lot of this data.
Yes.
In fact, they're probably creating all of this data.
Yes.
So it's helping them understand what I mean by this, their part to play, and also understanding how much they need of it in the future. Because you get a lot of, I'm keeping it just in case.
Yes.
And understanding why that is. Because there's a comfort blanket, isn't there, around hold on to it, don't ever get rid of it. But actually getting them to understand the risks of holding on to that data.
Yes. And even the classic, I have a 50 gigabyte Microsoft Exchange account. That's very interesting because we may have Mimecast or other things that have it all. So you don't need it there because you've got it there. Well, just in case.
Yeah.
And it's like, just in case what? What we lose both and all the backups of everything. You don't quite need. Although Microsoft hosted Exchange Online now has multiple sort of sources and redundancies, so you don't need it all in that place. It's a hard thing, isn't it, to convince the lawyer to you don't let go. It's really there. It's still there, but let go of this habit, this thing over here, which you're very addicted to.
And that speaks to the change management piece of this and the adoption of the new technologies and the challenge around that. Because you've got to take them on the journey to understand what the change gives them and how it'll improve their day-to-day operation. At the same time, giving them the comfort, it is still there when you need it. I think one of the biggest challenges I've faced around this is getting them used to a new way of working. And if they've never really been shown before, so for instance, partner X likes to store all his emails and keep his emails in his inbox, and he's got a wonderful filing system. The fact that this inbox suddenly then is 200 gigs worth of data and it's got 20 years worth of emails in it, well, that's not really the right way to do it. And as the sort of head of technology, I'm responsible for paying for the storage of that, the security of that, and your system.
How is that data then used holistically elsewhere?
Absolutely.
Where it might be useful?
Yeah.
But it's all in your head and it's all in your mailbox and it's not actually federated in any way.
That's right, and not shared, and you're not sharing it with other people. And one of the things we're really trying to push as a firm is this idea that we will work across sectors. So you might be a lawyer in litigation in shipping, but actually, is that information that you've got useful for our colleagues in aerospace or our colleagues in energy? So sharing that information, having it available for everybody, or sharing that data and having it available for everybody, is really key. So it speaks to that change and that getting them to adopt the new technology and thinking differently about the value of those ones and zeros. What's the value of that information?
Now you've just prompted me then. HFW, global law firm, global clients. You're in different continents of the globe, and that means there are different laws, there are different regulations, specifically around jurisdiction. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on, how you manage that jurisdictional element, the data governance elements, which can be different. It can be a bit of a minefield. So how are you approaching not just how you get the best use of your data in the right places to the right people and useful to clients, but how are you managing that along with it is different in different countries and there are different rules? What type of challenges is that throwing up for you in HFW and any other global law firm?
It is really challenging, and I wish there was a simple answer to this. It is taking a lot of time to understand this. We are working really hand in glove with risk to make sure we go through this. So we're doing a lot of contract review to make sure contracts that are existing with clients also that we're meeting their needs. But it takes expertise in each region to fully understand it.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but I am. Is that because actually certain clients themselves can write into contracts certain rules that they want you to follow with regards to their data, which isn't just about the regional jurisdiction, but it's about a unique client requirement?
Absolutely right, and that's something I don't think had been considered before.
Right.
Certainly not. My understanding at HFW is it hadn't really been considered before, so we're now making sure we do that. What I'm not doing is going to every client and suggesting that this is the way I'm solutioneering my, architecting my network or my environment. There's a little bit of, it's a conversation, but I am still driving on with migration to the cloud and changing the way that our infrastructure looks. But it is a conversation with them to understand what's achievable. Can we adjust some of the contractual terms?
Yes.
But also understanding the requirements. We had a great conversation last week with a client in Sydney who also happened to have a presence in America. We have a presence in Texas, but the laws in Texas are different from where this client was in in America. So we've got to have those conversations, but also understand from our standpoint what is achievable without overcomplicating the way that we deliver services. Because I still want to have an agile, flexible, scalable infrastructure to support our firm, but in a way that also meets the needs of what we're trying to deliver to our clients.
I think what we've just been talking about there flows very naturally onto doing good things for our clients. And getting this right is ultimately about delivering a great client service and giving them things that they want. And you and I actually both attended the Legal Technology Forum in October and November 21 at the end, and we were doing different things. I was on the IMO's tech stage all day, and one of the most interesting for me sort of chairing and hosting sessions were two large multinational, very well known, powerful big brands, one airline, one big tech company. And the session was, we're your clients, all the law firms in the room, we are your clients. What can you do better for us? And what should you be doing better for us? It was a fascinating session because they really called out a challenge to the room. You can see the sort of lawyers and managing partners bristle just a little bit as the challenge was put forward. Actually, your idea was all about innovation, how to innovate for clients. And the challenge was, you don't innovate for clients, you innovate for yourselves. You look at internal efficiencies. How can we increase the billable hour, our billable rate? How can we do more for less? Yeah. How can we, become internally efficient by getting rid of paper and all sorts of things? And you call it great innovation. And what they were saying is, that's fine and there's a place for that, I understand that. But what's that got to do with us, the client?
Yeah.
And the second challenge that was put out there is, you don't come and ask us what we want. And they got into a great debate in the room with lots of lawyers then saying, well, we're sometimes afraid just to turn up without an agenda, So, and they were saying, sometimes you come and present a technology to us and say, isn't this wonderful? And we either say yes or no, but what you don't do is come and speak to us and say, what can we do for you? What do you need from us?
And they're never going to say no if you offer a solution, are they?
Yeah.
They're never going to say no, I don't want it, if you suddenly offer a tool.
Yes.
Particularly if you think it's free.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the challenge to the law firms was, why don't you spend more time just talking to us, an open agenda? Don't worry about turning up and saying we're not coming with answers or solutions. We want to have a conversation with you to understand you a little bit better, so that we can then look at our innovation and how it matches maybe your expectations. So I just sort of put that out there. That was one of the interesting things that come back. But you I know that you're very key to draw insight from what you do, insight for your clients, not for yourselves. Maybe you can just expand, on what you think that matters importantly to you in HFW.
I see it's being really key to my role as well, this idea of how are we innovative in the way that we offer legal services to our clients, and what does that really mean? And if I think about how HFW operate, it's really difficult to be innovative in any other way other than client data portals, that sort of offering them insight into how much money they're spending with us, or how frequently they're using us. And I struggle to see. So the way that we're approaching this is a slightly different view. Is I'm now spending time with our associates as they go through their professional development to start to talk to them about technology and curiosity, and getting the lawyers to think about the themes of technology, talk about the really exciting things that's happening in general, and getting them to think about the questions they can ask a client when they're in that meeting, so they are curious. That's not to say I want to start selling technology. We're not a technology solution house, we don't want to do that, but I certainly want the client to have a view on what that solution might look like if it is a technology, if at all, and it might not be. So I'm now involved in conversations with clients where we're helping them think about document management systems. I have some experience of that. We have a document management system here. I could talk about what best practice might look like, and I'm helping inform their decision. I'm not going to provide it for them, and I'm not going to suggest they buy a vendor, but you can have those conversations. So I think it's a really, innovation's great, isn't it? Because you want to be innovative and you want to be at the sort of the right of the germ at the start of the idea. You want to be there, but equally, there's not much I can change here. There's not many ways I can be innovative and really sort of change the paradigm. But I think certainly being more intrinsic to the thought process of the clients is innovative. Being curious.
And those conversations, and you just touched on that, sometimes maybe it's giving your own lawyers the confidence to actually have a conversation.
Absolutely.
Maybe back them up, maybe go with them.
Absolutely.
To have that open conversation
Absolutely
with their own
right.
clients.
Yeah. And so we do it. So I'm
Yeah.
mixing that now, and it's where I think I add real value here, because it's not you don't want me just to lead the technology branch of the firm. You want me to be involved in those conversations because I could talk with some authority. I think also making sure that our lawyers get it and think about it and have a view of what's happening with technology. You know, we've got a huge shipping practice here, autonomous vehicles, autonomous ships. You know, that very concept, while scary, is also incredibly exciting. We need to think about that sort of stuff and be right at the forefront of some of these really big dynamic technology changes, and be mindful of that, because it will bleed through. We will see it, and we'll see. You know, we're already seeing autonomous vehicles in city centres to a far greater degree. And you think, well, we should be thinking differently about, and certainly getting the lawyers who might never have thought about technology before to be excited and curious about it and want to learn more.
It's funny how fiction becomes fact, and I'm slightly smirking at what you're saying, only because you prompted a Naked Gun film memory in my brain, a film from from 20 years ago, where they had those shipping tankers in the ocean, and they were in a miniature pond, and there's these automated sort of drivers on them, and of course 20 years ago it's ridiculous. Actually, it's not ridiculous.
No,
these things are actually stranger than fiction. Actually, these things are becoming real now, and the things that we have to address. This is a question mark that I ask every CIO in this podcast series, okay? So, you're the CIO at HFW. What keeps you awake at night, or what is prevalent in your thoughts?
I think the biggest worry bead has got to be cyber security. Current situation in the world, that we're, as you mentioned, we're a global firm. That means there's going to be tension there that we feel probably a little more acutely in some areas, but I think that's our biggest thing. Certainly when I arrived, it was one of my key deliverables that I mentioned with the board on my first sort of briefing to the board about what I was going to achieve would be, I will improve the security posture of the firm and continue to do so. I think that's the one thing. That and ensuring the availability of our network to partners when they need it globally.
Right. On the first piece, and I was going to ask, do we think the cyber threat situation is getting worse? It is. I'm going to answer it for you because we know with, unfortunately, global politics right now, what's going on. There are state actors, not just individual actors, playing in this field. Absolutely. And it is something that is something that we're all going to have to be very conscious of. We've just come off 12 months of a number of barristers' chambers being purposely hacked and attacked with targeting attack, not general phishing, but targeted attacks because of cases they were handling on behalf of certain individuals. Absolutely. So you agree? Unfortunately, it's the ever escalating sort of direction of travel, which is worrisome.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think about where we are located and where we want to grow our client base, it's going to become more and more prevalent, that state player activity. We're really fortunate here at HFW. Carl Knowles, our head of cyber, is now involved with the NCSC, which is the UK government National Cyber Security Centre that helps drive a lot of the policy around cyber security. He's involved in the Legal 100, which is a representation from the legal sector, working in there, really understanding the threat to our sector. And they talked a lot about what's happening at the moment in Eastern Europe and how that's going to impact. And I'm sure every other CIO would have felt this at the moment, that their networks are being sort of targeted in a different way than perhaps they would have been before. And actually I had a partner message me late last night where she was really worried that she thought we'd been tapped and there was an issue with her connectivity, but she immediately went to, is our network okay? Well, that's great that they're thinking about it.
That's their thought process, is naturally.
And I'm pleased that we're getting to the point where it's at the forefront of minds. But also, I've got to make sure people aren't worried and petrified, and they still want to use the system.
Yes.
And they still feel confident in the system because we're doing everything we can to keep it secure.
It's an important balance, isn't it? Of,
absolutely.
Not trying to scare the horses too much, but awareness, education, reactivity in the right way,
absolutely.
real time as well.
And
is very important.
We really, over the last 2 years, have talked a lot about people being our first line of defence at HFW and making sure that they all understand they have a part to play. It's great that we've got Carl and his team. It's great that we've got the tools that underpin it. But actually, the person that sat at the device gets the phishing email or whatever, they're the first line of defence. And if they're comfortable and confident and competent, they can react to that, and it helps protect the network.
Now, there's different types of stakeholders. There's the stakeholder of the lawyer or the support staff that you're talking about, and then there's the stakeholder of senior management and boards and investment boards and all the rest of it. And really the challenge today is that we need to continue not just to spend what we're spending, but spending more. Do you feel, and I won't make this about HFW, let's just talk about the legal industry and law firms. Do you feel that the owners and the senior partners are on board generally with the fact that this is an escalating situation and we've just got to spend more money and prioritise it? Do you think the legal industry is there now?
That's my sense. They are. I think we're seeing the SRA playing a bigger part in this as well, and other regulators. We've seen some law firms be fined.
Yes,
that's had a big impact. And this, recently we've started to see cyber insurers really play a part in this.
Yes.
And isn't it interesting to see that that's a new sort of factor that perhaps hadn't been considered before now.
Yes.
But if I can demonstrate to my cyber insurer that I have got these tools in place and here's my policies and process to be able to react to an event, that actually my cyber insurance premiums decrease or the amount I'm covered will increase.
Yes.
And that means really being able to articulate that ROI, that return of investment on tool X.
Yes.
Is not just about it's going to retain these clients or it's going to provide this level of security, but also your insurance premium will be less, or we're less. It's really interesting now that we're looking at it from the whole rather.
And
than
actually, there's two sets of insurers, isn't there? Really, in law firms, there's the cyber insurance, which is new constructs that have been created by the industry to protect and cover firms when they have need. Which becomes a requirement of the personal indemnity insurers, who are actually saying, well, actually, to get your general law firm insurance, we want to know that you're taking your cyber threat seriously, that you've invested, that you are maybe cyber insured, that you're Cyber Essentials Plus and other things.
Yeah.
And there are firms that have closed because they're not hitting because they can't get insured because they're not hitting those standards.
Yeah.
And now what's interesting in the barristers market is because they haven't been at the level of law firms when it comes to their own cybersecurity. They now have some of their law firm supplier clients saying to them, we're not going to pass you this work because we can't trust that you are ready. You've got to put your hand in your pocket and spend more money on this, which is harder for barrister chambers because chamber sets really are just a mechanism for self-employed barristers, but they really have to elevate that because it's having a consequence on their own insurance, but also with those. So are you hopeful, are you pessimistic about the future where cyber is concerned? Do you think even though things are difficult in the world and this threat is continuing, do you think we're going to continue to keep up, stay ahead, or just be where we need to be to not get drowned? Or where are you on the scale of pessimism?
I'm optimistic. I am optimistic, and I look at fintech. So financial technology and how that's evolved to meet the threat. So I probably have more availability to my bank account now through my mobile device than I did 10 years ago when the threat was less.
Yeah.
And now you talk about this prevalent threat and the increase, but actually because of multi-factor authentication and the fact that we're trusting biometric facial ID and all these, the technology is kept up. I have better access. So I have better access than I did when I had a bank manager and a local branch.
Yes.
So
In fact, most of the time you can't get anything done in the local branch.
No,
They
I would
refer
know.
you to the mobile app.
And I don't know where my local branch is.
I even find actually if you go onto their website, the website said use the mobile app.
Absolutely.
Because that's where they've driven all the security profiling, the biometrics.
And it works really well, and it gives you. So I'm confident, and I'm optimistic as technology adapts, grows, continues. And I think that we look at what Law Tech are doing, the initiative that's been led by the MOJ. As we think about this, we're on the. It'll be a constant evolution. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where you go, done, we've won, thank you, it's all.
No.
It's going to be constantly reviewing, but I think that we rely on the tenets: confidentiality, integrity, availability of the data and the information, training and awareness of our people. Making sure that people understand the risks, understand their part to play, and constantly thinking about the tool sets that you have in place to support your infrastructure, your network, your people. As you sort of go through it, I think would be key.
Something's just popped into my head. We didn't prep for this one, so here we go. But it's just popped into my head with this conversation. We're in a world now where technology is converging. Microsoft Stack, O365, M365, and so many benefits come from those things. We know this, and there's a lot of resiliency built into those systems by nature. A lot of security layers built into that. But could it also be argued that it's a potential single point of failure, and that we're also, and that's why I say
it's a lot of putting eggs into baskets, isn't it? It's really interesting.
It is. What do you think?
Well, and so we it's certainly, and I will profess, we claim we're a Microsoft house at HFW, and that's deliberate because I want to draw as much from their stack. And you would argue that the security stack of Microsoft has probably had far more time, money, development put on it than anything I could achieve.
And we push that as well at CTS, just to declare.
And so I absolutely think it's the right thing to do. We're also looking a little bit at what does our Azure versus AWS environment look like, so that we're not solely in one place.
Yes.
But you'd like to think that, certainly this is my hope and aspiration, is that Microsoft have done enough thinking about what happens if they lose an element of what they're providing and how we can back into it. We're also thinking about that though, and you mentioned sort of Outlook versus Mimecast and the fact that I have backups and I have different mechanisms to support that. So
there are other contingencies
absolutely.
you can put in place as place of last resort recovery.
Absolutely, but if I think about risk versus reward, is the risk is there no matter what system you use. What I am getting from a tool such as Microsoft is a whole range of opportunity for my people to work in a slightly different way.
Yeah,
we're starting to see much more use of bring your own device, corporate owned devices. Moving away from that.
The way to layer the security without having to dumbstruck a whole device, which is the one thing that I feared 5 years ago would bring your own device.
And we're spending an awful lot of time right now looking at what does conditional access look like for us. I love the idea that somebody might want to use their iPad at the weekend to work, and that they can have access to their Outlook and their HFW emails on their personal iPad. And I don't have to worry about that information bleeding over into their own, into their Gmail account or whatever. So that's a really, I'm back to that optimistic view. I'm taking the view that if I give people all these tools to be able to work as effectively as they want, they become more efficient.
Yes, and there's the other side that if everyone's on Microsoft and it goes down for a bit, well,
we're all
disadvantaged. Everyone just has to take a longer lunch until it sort of brings it back, and there's no disadvantage for any particular company over another. We're all in the same.
And they'll be rushing to repair.
And they'll get there.
Yeah.
So Mark, you and I a few moments ago were talking about change, but actually as we were talking about data and people getting used to different things, we were talking about change, and I just want to explore that a little bit more. I've been on the receiving end for many years of staff and fee earners saying, too much change, can't cope with all of this change. Either it's too much all at once, or every time we finish something, there's the next thing, there's the next thing, there's the next thing. I mean, we're exhausted, we can't possibly absorb all of this sort of change. And getting lawyers to change habits is, in my view, harder than the technology change itself. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on that and managing cycles of change, and is there such a thing as too much change?
Yeah. Yes, there is. And change fatigue is real. We as a technology leadership team are really, acutely aware of this. We are running at the moment one of the most ambitious projects from a technology standpoint that's probably ever been seen in this firm, and that's the upgrade of 13,000 devices,
Yeah.
complete desk refit outs, home fit outs, the whole 9 yards. And it's caused friction. And it's caused friction not because the technology doesn't meet the need, it's caused friction because it's change and it's asking people to do something in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
We've adopted zero trust, so we've lost RSA tokens. People are now able to use facial ID and biometric ID to gain access. All change.
Yes.
You add into that the fact that Microsoft regularly will change the look of Outlook or Teams,
Yes.
and that's created friction. So
And there's less control on that now because...
there's no control.
because,
Blimey, Microsoft will change something on you, you won't notice.
It's not an independent system
No.
anymore. They do it.
No.
It's just...
And they are very good at flooding you with change as well and
Yeah.
new functionality. So that's something we're really aware of and something we're focused on. So we're looking at re-rolling some people into change and adoption managers, so spending more time.
Right.
So what you would have historically understood as IT trainers,
Yeah.
we're now starting to get them out and they're change agents, they're adoption agents, and we're starting to get them to sit with people and help them understand what the change is about. But also from
And is that classroom based, or is that actually just more direct?
So we've got a bit of both actually. So we are providing videos and brochures and using Teams channels to keep the messaging going. We've got floor walkers, so people who are just will walk around with a nice Ask IT polo shirt on, so you could be identified. There might be a bit of white glove desk side service if we need it. So we're looking at that.
Yeah.
But also
So it's a combination.
it's a whole mix of stuff. But also my entire technology delivery team have been and undertaken change management training, so that every project now that we initiate will have a change thread throughout it to look at the impact.
And it's a change that looks at the human aspect of change, not just
Absolutely.
you now do ABC instead of DF.
So if anything, it's more focused on the human bit.
Right.
Because it's the lawyers who are going to be the ones who are too busy to read the training material, too busy to pay attention to the messaging. They sometimes just need somebody to come to them and say, if you do it like this now, it'll make your life easier, or this is why that change is in place. So we've been really focused on that. Again, we have a third-party supplier who helps us, who are change specialists.
Yes.
But also, I'm training my people. It's part of their lexicon now is to use change language in whatever we're doing for every project. So whether that's cloud migration, whether that's new telephony solutions, right the way through to document management. So the whole piece, change management is a golden thread throughout it, because I'm really aware the lawyers are busy. Add into that personality types and the fact that not many people enjoy change, then I've got to be really aware of that, because that can lead to the success or the failure of my project, or the perceived success or failure.
And I've always found a great irony in this, that one of the complaints I've had over 20 years of a sort of legal career is lawyers saying, this is so slow, or this process is too long, or it has too many clicks, or it's too convoluted, it's taking too much of my time, can you fix it? And you can fix it, but then you have to give some of your time, which you don't have, to actually learn and be willing to change your process. But why should you do it? Because you've been saying you hate this, but it's that sort of bad cycle of you've got to carve out the time and work with us, because it will address this, which you really didn't like, and 10% over here is a 30% saving over here, and that 10% is just a one-off, by the way, because once you're trained, you're trained.
You're trained.
You know, it's a one-off investment of time with odd top-ups. This is a permanent saving of time.
Absolutely.
In this benefit.
So we've always tried to ensure that we've pointed back to you said this, so we're doing this. So that there's the hook that says you had a problem with this, and this is the fix to that problem. So so that's twofold, right? We've heard what you've said, we've listened to your problem, we're making it better. And because it was your problem, not Parr's grand idea, because it's your problem, the solution is to meet your need. And that's probably the thing I'm really keen to make sure my team keep delivering this message. None of the stuff that we're changing is because I've got the grand idea. The stuff is being changed because it's to help grow the business. It meets the business strategy, or it gives our people better tools. And that's a mindset change for everybody, particularly in my department. So it's back to that technologist not answering the technology problem. It's the technologist providing a solution to the lawyer's problem. And that's meant a change in mindset for my department and taking my team through that change. Because many of them for a long time would have been the SME. They would have been the subject matter expert in subject X, and they're the ones that would have always driven that technology evolution. Whereas actually I'm now saying, stop doing that. Just because you want it to change, if it doesn't meet the needs of the fee earners, then don't change it.
It's why, and I equally am in a position where I speak to lots of law firms, and they come and ask for advice on this, and the first thing I always say to them is, why? Why are you changing? And it's always, because the tech doesn't do this sort of specific thing or this, and we think it can't do it. Well, have you first actually thought about all the things you actually need, and then compared it to all the things this thing can actually, whether it does it for you or not at the moment? Have you actually looked about whether what you've got could do something? But you've got to start with the why, not just that's 10 years old. We think we need to change it because this flashy thing over here is, in stars and stripes, lit up. Disruptive change, let's talk about that just for a second. So disruptive change can be very good, can't it, even if it's very painful. I'll give you sort of two examples, which is, there's some firms who purposely try and shake things up in order to stay fresh. It's painful, but it's a way to jump ahead and not become stale, especially if you're an established business. And one of the reasons maybe to do that is because of the external disruptive changes coming by new emergent firms building from scratch, or the big the big four financial houses investing heavily in law firms, buying up some law firms, modernizing them, building from scratch with big money. There is disruptive change going on out there. So sometimes disruptive change must happen for us to not become blockbuster video. What's your thoughts on that? Given what we've just said, that change needs to be carefully managed to keep people.
It's really interesting to see what's happening externally. I think for us at HFW, we are a sector-focused law firm, so we can't be too disruptive in the marketplace. We can think a bit differently, and we can be a bit more agile in our responses to our clients. But I don't think we can do anything really extravagant. We can be courageous, and there's a difference, but also tempered by what we provide and how we provide it. And also it's back to exactly that point. How much change could we absorb and still be effective and efficient? Also, I think about from a budgetary standpoint, is I don't have a vast pool of money to just be able to spend on stuff that isn't going to materialize into delivering better legal services to our clients. So there's definitely a balance to be had. I think there's an opportunity for some disruption in the sector.
Yes.
I don't think it's for us to be at that, and I talk to my team a lot about, I'd love to be bleeding edge. I'd love to be right at the very vanguard of some of this exciting stuff. I don't think we can afford to be that. I think where I want to be is just on the coattails. I want to be an expert follower.
Yes.
I want to be able to look at what some people have done, be considered about their approach, and then go, does that fit our MO? Is that the right thing for us? And be able to then come along that. So the disruption will be 2 or 3 steps ahead of us, but we might be able to take that and learn from that.
It's sector specific, it's there's a shake-up in the conveyancing market where even for high street law firms it's all gone online, and they need to be online as well as sort of physical with their clients, especially with what we've just been through. We've avoided the COVID word for the 2 hours, but it's the new world reality is that people need to be far more online. So where consumer services are certainly going on, there's a lot more disruption in that sort of sector of the market. So let's move on. AI, robotic process stuff, automation, and all that good stuff. It's been about 5 or 6 years worth of conferences, and I remember one I went to 4 years ago where this very bright AI scientist, I think from one of the big universities, basically said the singularity is around the corner and you're all doomed, you know. And I think 100 CIOs went to the bar and had a stiff drink, you know. As we, well, here we are 6 years later. We've not had the singularity yet, you know. Maybe it's around the corner. I'm curious as to your thoughts about the pace of change and adoption of AI. How real are the business cases? How real are these business cases? Isn't this just a money pit at the moment? A money pit for, you know, spend that doesn't really see so much business benefit. Where are you on the embrace skeptical scale?
I'm a skeptical embracer.
So sitting on the fence.
Yeah, I've got splinters. So we are looking at where we can implement it here. We've mapped some processes and we've looked at areas in that where I can find efficiencies through RPA.
Right.
So a bit of automation in a matter management of a certain type of matter, particularly high volume, low value work, so that
repeatable process,
stuff that can be done by a bit of RPA that will free up a bit of time for our lawyers to do the thinking at the end of the process, rather than churning out the same. So we're looking at that at the moment and starting to think about things like know your client checks, KYC checks.
Right.
Is there opportunity perhaps to use more automation there, and starting to think about those use cases. So I think there is opportunity, provided you've mapped the processes and you can see where the efficiencies can be made. I think there are opportunities to invest some money in that.
So that goes back to your earlier theme. Figure out what you need first,
Absolutely.
The why,
Absolutely.
the mapping of the process to understand, and then apply the relevant technology.
It's really interesting. We went through a whole activity to look at. We looked at shipping matters. We looked at 10 shipping lawyers who were doing slightly different work, so we'd all tell you that their 10 processes were all completely different. And when you map them, you could see the similarities. You could see very clearly the bits where they did exactly the same work.
Yes.
And then you say, well, actually, that's an opportunity to do something smarter there.
Yes.
And that's where we think RPA can help us. We're never ever going to replace the bright, smart lawyer who's doing the thinking behind the problem.
Well, that's the big debate, isn't it? That actually, going back to our discussion earlier on data, once you understand your data, humans can only analyze and review data at a certain human bit rate, okay?
Yeah.
And sometimes a number of them. Whereas actually, the analysis and the number crunching of data and comparison, there are now a number of tools out there that are very swift at crunching big data and big numbers and actually providing information to lawyers that then allows them to really use the quality of their brain, which is, we've
the
done
nuance,
around
the nuance.
You don't need to look at 3,500 pages. You need to look at these 50.
Yeah.
It's these clauses in these 50.
Absolutely.
Where and they can suggest things. And I've seen some products now, only in the last 12 months, that are really beginning to provide that innovation.
And I think it still goes back to that foundation. You've got to have had the process mapped. You've got to understand what that looks like. You've then got to make sure that you identify the commonalities. Because I think a lot of this is around nuance, and a lot of lawyers will tell you that it's their ability to look at that and add their nuance to it and understand the way that the language is written, or to be able to determine a specific route. That's the bit where they add their real value, and that's why I think there's a place for AI, there's a place for machine learning. It's not going to take up all of that, but I think anywhere where it's able to provide efficiencies for the lawyers to do that deep thinking, that navel gazing, beard scratching thought is helpful.
And there's that debate, isn't there, about the bias, which is that ultimately AI systems are put together by human beings that create things with certain bias. So it's giving you your 50 pages out of your 3,500. But has there been an element of some sort of bias where actually a human lawyer would pick something out of the 3,450 pages that you're not sort of looking at? I'm minded actually just of the post office system.
Oh, absolutely.
And there was such belief, wasn't there, that the system cannot be wrong. Horizon, I think it was called. Yeah. It cannot be wrong, so you're all criminals. Yeah. But the common sense approach is we surely can't have so many criminal postmasters Yeah, there was such a scale. Clever enough to steal pennies at a time and then add it up. And maybe there's the fear that actually we're not mature enough yet in this area not to trust that there's things that a human being would sort of pick out.
Yeah.
So,
which is why I think right now for us it is let's look at those areas where it really would be effective.
Yeah.
And how that can make efficiencies that support our lawyers versus trying to replace the whole thing. Maybe in 10 years, 15 years time will be better. But it also points back to the data, doesn't it? And if your data is the one true source of data, and if it is tagged correctly, as the right information to it, you can understand it fully, then you could draw that insight, and maybe then we'll see. But right now, with all of those things sort of not quite converging as you'd want, I think we're a long way off it being ubiquitous.
Mark, how do you cope with the shiny new toys thing that occasionally you might get a Fiona come along or a partner come along and say, "Oh, I've seen this. Someone's contacted me, and there's this wonderful thing." Of course, it might be wonderful, or it might not be the time. Does that happen a lot? It happens at different levels in different firms.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you deal with the shiny new toys approach from Fiona's.
I'm pleased when they do. I'm pleased that they take an interest in what we're thinking about, and that's a good thing. So any opportunity, I try not to just be the wet blanket that says no, not right now. So we'll talk about the journey we're on, and we've got a 5-year technology roadmap that's already been articulated. So we will spend time talking about that and where this shiny new toy might or might not fit in that.
Right.
I also talk to them about the budgetary understanding and making sure that they get a sense of what I'm spending our money on.
Yes.
Because I don't have a never-ending pot of money. I have a budget that, whilst healthy for the size of organisation, is probably tied down to the last penny to make sure I'm spending it on the right thing. So it's really difficult to try and keep them buoyed, and it goes back to that conversation where I want them to be curious. I want the fee earners to think about technology and have that in their lexicon and feel comfortable to talk about it. So I'm quite happy to be invited to conversations, but I'm also not scared to say at the end of it, no thank you, I'm full.
So, Mark, we've avoided any dreaded talk about code and all the rest of it, and I'm not going to get into that now. But let's just talk about the future legal workplace, because a lot of firms are now changing what they're doing right now. Well, they've made the change, or in the process of making changes, for a different type of workspace, workplace, in their hybrid working models and all of those. What's your thoughts on how firms are adapting and perhaps some of the things you're doing here at HFW?
Yeah, it's been a great accelerator, hasn't it? The reaction to the pandemic, coming back to the office, has helped us really think about what does that new flexible approach to work look like. We talk about hybrid working, we talk about collaboration and the collaboration tools. So ensuring that regardless of where you are when you're operating, you feel you're part of the conversation. So that's a really key. Some challenges around behaviour there. I don't think it's a surprise to learn that we are moving out of our current building. We're moving out of where we are now, Friary Court. We're moving into one of the new buildings on Bishopsgate. We're going to go into 8 Bishopsgate, hopefully in the autumn. That will help further embed some of these new ways of working. And really, the focus is on collaboration. We don't want people to be stuck in offices with doors closed. We want them to think about being able to work with each other far more collaboratively, being able to participate in conversations far more readily. So that's allowing us the opportunity. It's really exciting for the technology team, is to really think about what that looks like in the way of this new modern workspace, and greater reliance on people being able to move up from a desk and go and find a spot to work together in a different part of the building, or maybe corral a team together quickly and have that conversation. So thinking about soft telephony, thinking about collaboration tools. We've got Teams is prolific now, but we want to go beyond that, so we're looking at other tools to be able to bolster that.
And not just formal meeting places, but collaboration spaces.
Oh, absolutely. So really like that idea that you might just drop in and have a coffee together, and that might evolve into a conversation where you draw some people into it. So little breakout spaces, making greater use of quiet rooms, so being able to go away and concentrate, contemplate, but also communicate and collaborate, and really thinking about those 4 C's as being the theme throughout all of what we're doing. Because you will know as well as I that there will be days when you are better placed staying at home because you just need the headspace, or you can just get on and do something. But equally, it's really enriching to be able to be with your colleagues and work through a problem or talk through a problem. Maybe you want to brainstorm, but actually, because of our global footprint, we've already started to think about this before the pandemic. Right. How do I ensure that the team in Australia that's supporting the work being delivered in Houston have the same access to the tools at the same time, are able to operate together, can mark a document up at the same time, whatever it may be? How do we meet that? So I think it's a great opportunity. We are here now in a new hybrid world. People are going to work differently. People have got different needs. People will want to operate in a different way. I think as a CIO, for me, it's incumbent on me to provide them the right tools to support that, to make sure that they are able to be as effective regardless of where they are.
And sometimes the challenge I find at the moment is that the hybrid world is that some of you are in the office together and some of you are at home, but you may all be sat separately in the office and you're all on a team sort of get together. Yeah. You may be able to hear one another, and it can be quite distracting with people just walking back. So actually, in the workplace, you want to actually come together with those who are on the one singular source of the room, and then to be able to connect to those others, or to be able to concentrate. So it's a little trickier, isn't it? It's creating spaces that actually allow that, rather than the frustration of, I'll just stay at home because I'm on Teams meetings all day, and it's just easier if I do it at home. Yeah. Well, actually, it's creating spaces where it is easy. It's just as easy to do it in the office without it being difficult.
And you don't want the person to pick up their device, walk away from the desk, lose connectivity, have to dial back in, and all. So we've got to think about these things. But I think it's really interesting is that idea that what you can imagine, there's 10 people on a call, they're all in the building, but they're all at their desk and they're all within 3 foot of each other. Yes. It probably didn't need to be hosted on Teams then. You probably could have just had a conversation. There's a lot here as well around the behaviour. So it talks back to that change management bit and the adoption of this new technology. But I think
so you're building this into your new place that you're
absolutely.
Going into.
So we're starting to make sure that we have the technology now. So I want people. Then we have a great tool, a collaborative, immersive technology tool that we have here in the building that supports us, and by having it in place now and getting people used to it, when we go to the new building, it will help because they'll already be used to it. They'll have that confidence and competence with the equipment, so they'll use it far greater effect. But I think that's for us technologists, this is where we can get really excited about this stuff. I love the idea that we could start to think about, okay, so what does active noise reduction look like? How do I think about, how do people recognize if you're at your desk that you might not want to be disturbed, and maybe we can have, how do I represent that in a physical space? It's quite easy on Teams. You change your status. If you're at your desk and you don't want to be disturbed, how do people just walking up to your desk know that? So there's lots of things that we're thinking about now that really excited stuff that we hadn't considered before, but really part of the technology stack and how it all fits in.
Fantastic. Mark, thanks very much for the time you've given us today. Very generous. We've covered a great range of topics, and it's good to hear about what you're doing here at HFW, as well as your thoughts actually on some of the challenges in the wider legal market and where we go. I've certainly enjoyed that time, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. It's been really good. I thoroughly enjoy these conversations. You're always very good at drawing out ideas and themes from people, so I always appreciate the time for you and I to sit and have a chat.
Always a pleasure, never a chore. Thanks, Mark. So that wraps up this podcast today with my guest, Mark Parr, CIO at HFW. It's been a great session, and we'll have our next audience with the CIO coming very, very soon. Until that time, goodbye from me. Thanks for tuning in to the Shaped for Law podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode and picked up useful insights into the world of legal tech. You can catch more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Whilst you're at it, I would greatly appreciate your support by liking, sharing, and leaving a review of this podcast. Until the next time, this is David Fazackley signing off.